Dear friends, good evening. Thank you for joining us into our pre-chamber lecture series. And tonight, we will give some continuation to our lecture from last week. We're going to speak today about two of the gods of the elements of nature. Last week, we spoke about nature, tattvas, and elementals. And we spoke about the vibrations of ether that condense on the elements. And how is it that those elements create an environment in which the elementals manifest? We also stated that you orient your body towards certain directions, whether north, south, east, or west. And as you do this, you can work specifically with some of these elemental gods of nature. These elemental gods, the word God is a heavy word, and some people, as they hear it, they tend to react internally in some sort of violent way. And if that is the case, then let's open ourselves to something a little bit different. Because these masters, powerful beings, we can call them gods, we can call them angels, we can refer to them as archangels, we can refer to them as masters. In our current condition, whether we call them gods, angels, masters, we are making no mistake at all. And thus, from that perspective, we're going to learn today about the gods of fire and the god of earth. And in the Aztec tradition, these gods are known by the names of Huehueteotl, for the god of fire, and Koalikowi, who is the goddess of earth. Looking a little bit from the reason to be of these gods, the Aztec tradition, within the pantheon of their gods, they say that Ometecutli and Omecihuatl, who are the two primary forces of creation, the Lord and Lady of Duality. These two principles came together and they gave form to the universe. They weaved the tapestry of creation that is the universe itself. And as they did that, from their union, they saw the emanation of four children. Ometecutli is the god, the god of duality, and Omecihuatl is the two goddess, or the lady goddess of duality. We know that for every creation to exist, there has to be a third force that conciliates them. There is always the masculine principle and the feminine one, and the force that conciliates is that force of love. And notice how Ometecutli and Omecihuatl, as they come together to weave the tapestry of creation that is the universe, notice how there is a third manifestation within them. And that manifestation there is a manifestation represented with death. This is super important. But let's get to that in a minute. In Ometecutli, the masculine principle of creation, we see the presence of the Christ. By now, in the many lectures that we have covered the topic of the Christ, well, we have learned that Christ is not just a masculine form. We know that it is more than that man who walked on water and was able to exercise remarkable miracles. We have learned that Christ is a title. We have learned that Christ is indeed a cosmic and organizing principle of creation. And thus, in Ometecutli, the masculine principle of creation, we see the presence of this cosmic Christ. Cosmic, again, not from the perspective of the vastness of space with all of its constellations and galaxies, but cosmic rather from the perspective of an organizing principle, a principle that kickstarts and jumpstarts the process of creation itself. And Ometecutli is presented with a very prominent phallus. And the phallus of Ometecutli, even though it is a cosmic principle of creation, is made of flint. It is of stone. And what we come to see is that this masculine principle in which the presence of the Christ exists is a being of fire. Thus, Ometecutli, as the Lord of Duality, is the Ancient of Days. It is the old God. It is the same as that representation of God that we are so familiar with, of that man with the long white hair and the long beard. It is the same thing. It is just that it is presented here a little bit different, because the cultures are different and the idiosyncrasies are different, and thus the symbols need to be different so that they can adapt to the psyche of the people. Now, speaking about the feminine principle of creation, Omecihuatl, the Lady of Duality, well, she is then the cosmic virgin. She is always presented with a blue tunic, and the colors blue and red are always very prevalent in any image that we see from deities and angels and saints. And that is because red, this pure color red, not the dirty, bloody red, but this pure, vibrant red is a color that represents the highest spirituality. And the color blue is indeed the color that symbolizes love. So as a cosmic virgin, as the divine mother, well, she is dressed with a blue tunic. And among the Aztecs, well, she's not only Omecihuatl, she is also Tonantzin. Tonantzin as the expression of the divine mother. Ometecutli and Omecihuatl, they come together. A third force reconciles them, unites them, and their offspring is what is known as the Four Dexcalibocca. And the Four Dexcalibocca, one of them is red, another one is black, another one is blue, and another one is white. Samael tells us these are indeed the four colors of the races that populate the world. And these four Dexcalibocca, each one has a specific mission, a specific purpose when it comes to creation. If we start with Cipetotec, Cipetotec is the one that appears here with a red background. You're going to see it at the bottom left corner. Cipetotec appears red because Cipetotec has taken off his skin. Well, this is a very visual, imaginary representation. But the fact that we see him here without skin, and thus red, is because it implies that there is sacrifice. And with every sacrifice, well, there is a degree of discomfort that is experienced. In the condensation of creation from the realm of the spirit, as it descended through the universes and the different planes to this realm of 3 dimensions, well, there has always been this challenge between matter and spirit over those who are experiencing those transitions, same as we have all experienced it. Then there is Quetzalcoatl. And Quetzalcoatl, Quetzal is feathers and Coatl is serpent. So the feathered serpent happens to be the white one. And the white one is on the top right corner. Quetzalcoatl is a Christic principle as well. It is the fire that redeems and that enables all in creation. Then there is Dexcalibocca. And Dexcalibocca is the black one. He happens to be on the top left corner of the image. And Dexcalibocca is the smoking mirror. It is that smoking representation upon which creation is reflected upon. It is the majesty and the abstractness of the space. And to the bottom right corner, in that fourth position, we see the blue one. And the blue one is of name Huitzilopochtli. Huitzilopochtli means the left-handed hummingbird. And there is a whole lecture that we dedicate to Huitzilopochtli, because when it comes to what makes each and every one of us, as we are made of a triad, a specific trinity, well, we know that we have a body, we have a soul, and we have a spirit. And the bridge between the spirit and the body is indeed the soul. We know that the work that we must do, based on what we have learned through all of this doctrine, is that of crystallizing a soul that is of a superior nature, so that that connection between the physicality and the spirit can truly manifest. So our work is to create that solar type of soul, that soul that is a combination of bodies and faculties and powers and abilities and laws and superior bodies, all of those things together. And what exists at the other side to create that strong connection, our spirit. Well, our spirit is represented by Huitzilopochtli. For all purposes, Huitzilopochtli is a symbol of the innermost, of an individual and particular innermost that we all have a Father who is indeed in secret. And these four Dexcalibocca are forces that help conform and organize creation. These are forces that propel creation forward. And they all come to be because of that eternal feminine principle. In our advanced level lectures, there are a combination of around 25 different lectures that are specific on a 3-month seminar specific to the eternal feminine and how it applies throughout all of the levels of creation. But for our purposes today, we will speak of that eternal feminine principle in terms of 5 specific manifestations. Because the 5 aspects of the Divine Mother, well, they start as the unmanifested space. As you would remember from the writings in the book of Genesis, it states that on day 1, God created day and night. There was the separation between light and darkness. And for that manifestation to exist, then it is evident that there was an unmanifested light and that there was also an uncreated, unmanifested space. That uncreated, unmanifested space that is known as the Ein Sof is our Divine Mother. That unmanifested space is known as Mula Prakriti. In some areas of the Asian of the Hindu tradition, she is known also as Maha Prakriti, the great vastness unmanifested, or the great vastness mother of creation. But as that creation descends, as she projects herself and allows to become the womb of all of nature, then we see her representation as the goddess of nature that we know as Tonantzin in the Aztec tradition, that is known as Ram-Io among the ancient Gnostics. The Egyptians would know her as Isis, and we will traditionally refer to her in a very simple form as Mary. But as the ray of creation continues, well, there are other forms and aspects of the Divine Mother that are necessary for creation to exist. And in the inferior worlds, in those regions that are known as the hell or the Averno, Inferno, or the abyss, that eternal feminine principle also exists. And as the goddess of hell, as what is known, the terror of love and law, we see the presence of our Divine Mother as Hecate. She is Prosperina. She is also known as Koalikowi. And on an individual and particular level, because each one of us is indeed a microcosmos in nature, well, she is our individual Divine Mother, giver of our physical body. As we have learned in the transmigration of the souls, once those monads reach a certain level of development, they transition from the animal kingdom into this humanoid kingdom. We are given a human body as a superior elemental animal to work with it so that we can then take the leap onto the other side. And that aspect of our Divine Mother responsible of giving us this body is our Divine Mother, Kundalini. And within the body itself, existing within this microcosmos, well, she is the elemental magi. She is the magician of the elements to whom we owe every instinct and every vital impulse. So to speak of our Divine Mother, we can speak of her in many different forms. And one may resonate more with you than another, and that is perfectly fine. But it is also important that we expand our foundation. Because when we expand our foundational culture, then we have something better to build upon when it comes to understanding and grasping of this wisdom. So our Divine Mother in Christianity, it is very easy to recognize her as Mary. If we go to India, we will see that the Divine Mother is presented as the Divine Mother Goddess. And we see her here, just giving birth to all of creation. But within the Hindu tradition as well, we see her as Prithvi. We see her as Shakti. We see her as Durga. We see her as Prakriti. And these are all her most superior manifestations. And in her aspect as the goddess of love and law, as the terror of the law, she is Kali. And Kali is very aggressive. As we can see her here, she is very fierce. And notice that she has beheaded someone, and she is carrying that head with her. And notice that her collar is carrying heads. And this is because this aspect of the Divine Mother, as the goddess of the inferior regions of creation, as the goddess of hell, she is the catabolic force responsible of destroying all of our psychological aggregates, provided that we choose to not work them here. Well, as our cycle of 108 lives extinguishes, as we complete those 108 lives, if we do not make an effort to make a transition onto the other side, well, then the forces of nature will inevitably send us into hell. Kali, Prosperina, Hecate, Koalikowi, however we want to call her. As a catabolic force of nature, she will destroy these aggregates for us. So the key takeaway here is that whether we work it here willingly or in the inferior regions of the world, it is our Divine Mother, the one who will always eliminate our psychological aggregates. It is just better for us to work that here and to do that consciously. And when we see Kali and we see that level of aggressiveness, we can see that it is indeed shocking. We can see that the fierceness is certainly a shock to the consciousness. But notice that she is of the color blue. And it is blue because we already know that that blue is the color of love. Notice that behind her there is a fire. There is a fire that consumes, just like the fire of Kundalini consumes our psychological aggregates and reduces them to a cosmic dust. It is just that between our Divine Mother Kundalini and Kali, well, the manifestation of that force is indeed different. Among the Aztecs, Koalikowi, which is the same as Kali, is represented a little bit different. And here we see the top of what has been a monolith carving of this divine eternal feminine principle. Notice that at the very cusp, at the very top of this carving, in this monolith we see two serpents. These are two serpents that are coming to face each other. The fangs are pointing outward, and there are two tongues. These two serpents, this serpentine binary, is a representation of Kundalini and the Kunda buffer organ. Kundalini is the serpent of fire that Moses erected out in the desert. It was the serpent of bronze that healed the Israelites. The Kunda buffer organ is a different type of serpent. That is the tempting serpent in the Garden of Eden. As a matter of fact, the Kunda buffer organ, it is very commonly seen in the images of the devil as that red tail that has an endpoint, a tip in the shape of an arrow that is always pointing downwards onto the inferior regions of the earth. Notice that Koalikowi, right at the very center, we notice that there are two deflated breasts. These are breasts that have run out of nourishment. This is the aspect of the mother that comes to resolve what we had not taken care of while we have been here. And while Kali is wearing a collar that is made of many heads, egos or psychological aggregates that have been reduced to cosmic dust, well, here we see that Koalikowi carries a collar that has 4 hands. It has 2 left hands and it has 2 right hands. And every time we see these pairs, well, we inevitably consider the phenomena of the principles masculine and feminine. And the union of those two that happen to be materialized in the sacrament of matrimony. Notice that there is a skull on her waistline. Now, this skull is not a buckle. It is certainly not a belt buckle or an ornament. It is that for all purposes, everything that we have seen thus far seems to be like a massive headdress of Koalikowi. This skull that we see at the level of what appears to be the waistline, this is indeed the face of Koalikowi herself. As part of this figure, we see that there are what appear to be 2 shoulders. And notice that in those shoulders, there are fangs. So there are 2 serpents with their mouths, with their jaws open, and the fangs and the tongues are extended as in an attitude of devouring. And as we can look further into the picture, as we will see on the next page, we will see that her forearms are flexed. Her hands are also like serpents, holding 2 rectangles that have been split in 2, as if it were a broken philosopher's stone. All this combination of claws and serpents is of much interest. In those of you students who have already partaken of the seminar on the spheres of hell, where we go through all of the spheres outlined in Dante's comedy, well, we know that there are expressions of these very same serpents in those inferior spheres of hell, serpents that are responsible for bringing expiation. They bring the necessary condiment that is necessary in those dramas that take place in those inferior spheres, so that those aggregates can be reduced to nothing and the consciousness be liberated. As you see here on this image, now that we're focusing at the level of the waistline and from the waistline down to her feet, you can see the face of Koalikowi. And this particular representation shows her wearing, of course, a skirt that is made of that has been woven with serpents. It so happens that the name Koalikowi, Coatl, means serpent, and Kue, Likue means skirt. So Koalikowi means she who wears the skirt of woven serpents. And we see here all of these entwined serpents also pointing downwards. As we see her legs, we can see that she is wearing some kind of underskirt that is made of feathers. And part of a beautiful story is that Chimalma, the mother of one of the great Aztec masters, as a representation of the Divine Mother similar to Mary, she also enjoyed of an immaculate conception. And Chimalma was sweeping the floors of the temple when suddenly from the heavens descended a big ball of feathers. In curiosity, she extended her hand to touch it, but as she did, one of the feathers pricked one of her fingers. And as she looked at the finger and looked back, the ball of feathers had disappeared. The next morning, she woke up to realize that she was indeed pregnant. So we see that very same symbol of the feathers. The same feathers that appear in Huitzilopochtli, the left-handed hummingbird, a symbol of the Christ. And we see her underskirt made of feathers as well, a symbol of divinity, a symbol that is indeed superior, as in the Egyptian tradition where we have the ma'at, feather, which is that feather that gets deposited in the scales of justice to see the quality of the mind of the defunct. But notice her legs, and her legs are also serpents. And in her case, not only the serpents are extending their fangs also downward, the eyes of those serpents are always looking upwards towards the infinite space. As in indicating, as part of my work, the purpose of my work is to create a connection between this lower sphere of creation and the vastness of creation. As she stands, on the rock that she stands, we see an image of Mictlantecutli. And if you would entertain this and you look at what this stone carving looks like, you will see at the very top that there is a helmet that seems to be fairly similar to the helmets of the Japanese samurai. But notice that the face of this creature is that of a skull, and his arms and his legs are flexed and spread from side to side. For all purposes, Mictlantecutli is creating with his body something similar to the cross of St. Andrew. Those of you who would remember, St. Andrew was crucified in a cross that was shaped like a letter X. This is a very same representation of what is known as the Nordic rune Gibur. This is the very same swastika of the ancient Buddhists. Mictlantecutli is the god of hell. And what is very specific about this stone carving on which Koalikowi stands is that in his belly, right there where we should see his navel, what we see is a big opening that swallows into the realms of hell. When we take Koalikowi and we look on her back, we see a different aspect. On the front, we see the terror of love and law. But on the back, we come to see the face of Tonantzin. In the front, we see Kali. On the back, we see the beauty of Mary. And on her back, not only we see this skull, also in balance with the one in the front. But we see that there are feathers. We see that there is a weaving that is completely different than that of the serpents. And this face is connected with the other face through this belt that is indeed a circle, perhaps the circle of creation. This different weaving of feathers is a projection that emanates and that is projected and expands downward. And that is the universal fire of creation. It expands from the vastness of the cosmos all the way down to her feet. So on the back we see Tonantzin, and on the front we see the shadow of Tonantzin, which is Koalikowi. Koalikowi is the terror of love and law. She is the fifth aspect of our Divine Mother. Tonantzin, Isis, Mary, Maria, is our Divine Mother Kundalini. Maria, Mary, is the igneous serpent of our magical powers. She is that divine, eternal, feminine principle that exists within each and every one of us. And it is an eternal feminine principle that is necessary because in the collaboration that comes together in the sacrament of marriage, well, it is the super dynamic of love what leads us into the awakening of the fire of our Divine Mother. Koalikowi being the serpent of the abyss, her being the fifth aspect of the Divine Mother, she is the goddess of earth. But because cultures and idiosyncrasies and groups, she has many names. And one of her other names is Psychoanalytic. Psychoanalytic, remember, Coatl means serpent. And Psychoanalytic has become a key element in folklore and in many legends. And she is the main character behind this person referred to as La Llorona. Most Hispanic countries have a variation of the Llorona. The Llorona is such a cultural thing that there are even documentaries and kids shows that explain about the sufferings of this woman. Because this is a woman who carries a mysterious cradle. And if she's not presented carrying a mysterious cradle, she is carrying the corpse of an infant. And she whims bitter lamentations, looking out for her children. And this, in a way, is a representation of our Divine Mother. Because we live in a condition in which we have forgotten about our Divine Mother. For the most part, many groups, many schools, perhaps some religions have a direction of spiritual development that is entirely masculine in nature, where redemption is through a man and salvation is through a man, and the walking into the Garden of Eden or the walking in through the gates of heaven is exclusively through the hands of a man, as if the woman had no role. The psychological effect of that has been the forgetting of the importance of this eternal feminine principle. And here, what we see is a representation of our Divine Mother who suffers because she is trying to save her children. All the suffering of La Llorona is caused because of, quote unquote, abandoning a cradle in the markets. And in that cradle, what exists is a knife of sacrifice. This knife of sacrifice is the knife of sacrifice that we must use to dissect our own defects, so that we can see ourselves as we truly are, so that we can cut through the veil that we have created in the many fallacies of the ego. These images of what we are and how we want people to see us, that are true only for ourselves, not for anyone else. And friends, Koalikowi is the goddess of earth. This divine being is also known as Arbarman. Another name is Gob. Another name is Kitichi. The name does not matter. What is important here is the understanding of the power of this great powerful master. And the temple of earth is always towards the north. Anywhere you may be, as you orient yourself to the north of the planet, that is the direction in which we can face towards the temple of earth. And we can always work through our innermost, invoking the goddess of earth, whether Koalikowi, Gob, Kitichi, or Arbarman. And we can ask for permission to work with the gnomes and pygmies of earth. Because we can always ask our innermost to invoke of these powerful masters of nature, so that we can get permission to work, in this case, with the gnomes and pygmies of the earth. And we can then ask through our innermost all of these elementals of earth to work helping us gain emotional stability. Something that is so important to face the many adversities that we face every day. Some of us may be going through a family problem. Many of us may be going through some financial situation. Perhaps it is a health issue. Maybe it's all three. And it is important that we develop emotional stability. And the element of earth symbolizes that stability. We can ask to work with these gnomes so that they can help us gain that emotional stability, so that we can set a solid foundation for those who are around us and, in a way, are not only influenced by us, but that can be depending on us. We can ask of these elementals to strengthen our bones, to help strengthen our tendons, our ligaments, to enrich our blood, to heal our muscles, to heal our organs, anything that has to do with the philosophical earth that is our physical structure. We can even ask these elementals of creation, the gnomes and pygmies of earth, to strengthen our homes, to strengthen the foundation, the walls, the windows, the ceiling, so that our homes can withstand the fires, the earthquakes that are coming onto us as a fifth race. And we can do all this simply by working with our divine goddess, Mother Earth, facing to the north and asking to work with her elementals. But the other god that we wanted to share is Huehueteotl. And Huehueteotl is the god of fire. He is known as the elder god. Huehue means old, and Teotl, Theos, means God. And Huehueteotl appears as this very old man, because we already said it, the elder god, the ancient of days. He rules over the elementals of fire, but he is also an initiated master, just as is Koalikowi. These are all Buddhas of contemplation. These are all Buddhas that have taken the spiral path. And in that spiral path, well, they are endowed with missions and specific and entrusted with specific work. So Huehueteotl is an initiated master. He is also a divine being. He is an angel. He is the ancient of days. He is the father of our father. He is the father of gods, and he is the father of men. He is all of those things at the same time. And as we continue working internally, as we continue to observe and comprehend and eliminate these defects by invoking of the flaming serpentine fire of our Divine Mother, well, we ultimately fuse with the innermost, and Huehueteotl, this source of fire, becomes our final synthesis. Just like the seraphim, those of you more familiar with those angelical hierarchies from the Christianity perspective, well, the seraphim is a being of fire. That is the meaning of the word seraphim. And this ancient of days exists within the depths of the consciousness of every man and every woman that exists. As an element of nature, Huehueteotl is the Abraxas of the Gnostics. It is that Tao of the Chinese. And we spoke about the circle of Tao in one of our previous lectures, particularly when we spoke about the law of the pendulum. Huehueteotl is the Zen of the Buddhists. He is the Agnus Dei. Among the Christians, he is Inri. And Inri, of course, you have seen that written before as 4 characters stamped, nailed at the very head of the cross where the great master, Yeshua, Jesus, was crucified. Yeah, we have been told that Inri means Jesus Nazarenus Rexio Deorum, or Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. But no, we have to go beyond that. Inri means the fire incessantly renews everything in nature. Ignis natura renovatur integram. Huehueteotl as a natural element is the fire of the Gnostics. And as a master who sacrificed and went through the very similar ordeals that we have gone through with family problems and conflicts and hardships, well, he is a self-realized man. He was able to focus on the internal work of maintaining that internal remembrance of self, just to set his consciousness free. And in his development, within the hierarchies of angels, he is a Malachim of nature, ruler over billions and trillions of salamanders of fire. And there is a mantra that we can chant, because as a representation of the Father of our Father, the Father of our innermost, or the Father of our spirit, we can always chant the mantra Pander to communicate with our own Glorian. For all purposes, it would be not to call your father, but to call what would be your grandfather here on earth. And for that purpose, we can chant the mantra Pander. And this is a mantra that we can chant 3 times, or 7 times, or 10 minutes, or 30 minutes, or as much as you feel you deem necessary. Because everyone has a different experience as they chant these mantras. Pander. As we chant this mantra, we can invoke of the Ancient of Days and ask for guidance, ask for help in our internal work. Friends, we speak about the Salamanders of Fire, and we speak about this God because this God is responsible for all of these elementals that exist within the tejas of nature, that element of fire. And what we find in the writings of the book of Lambspring is that it says, the salamanders live in fire and impart to the fire the most glorious hue. This fire, it is important that we see it beyond this appearance of flames, light and heat that only appeal to the senses, because this fire is many things. This fire is a fire that brings warmth, light, and security, but it is also a fire that redeems, and it's a fire of creation. We see here in this image a representation of Zoroaster. In the Avesta, those sacred writings, we find the legend of Zoroaster. And notice that Zoroaster is carrying a cross in this very prominent hat that he's wearing. And that hat, exaggerated as it is the same symbol as the hair ornament on the crown of the Buddha. It is an indication of a 7th chakra that has been awakened, that is active, and through which the fire of Pentecost emerges. So here we see Salamander of Fire, and we see this master standing on it as in showing dominion over the fire. This is dominion that has to exist over the fire in matrimony, so that the couple walks into the super dynamic of love as a superior practice and not as an inferior animalistic animal union. This is a fire that requires of a chemical chastity, because chastity has been severely misunderstood. It is a chemical chastity where we seek for the transmutation of our creative energies, not for the storing of energy, because every time we store energy, the energy becomes very unstable and bad things happen to it. And notice that he is holding 3 flowers. These 3 flowers are the 3 principles of creation. These are also known as the 3 gunas, rajas, sattvas, tejas. One that starts creation, one in the middle that nourishes it and sustains it, and the last one, well, the force of nature that brings everything down to its natural completion. All of these atomic elementals of fire that exist under the hierarchies of Huehueteotl, the god of fire, well, they are under the influence of angelic hierarchies of the constellations of fire. Constellations of Sagittarius, Leo, and Aries. They are all influenced by these hierarchies of fire. And notice how the constellations of the zodiac exist within the microcosmic man. The fire of Aries exists in the head. The fire of Leo exists in the heart. And the fire of Sagittarius exists within the femoral arteries within our thighs. Because it is that fire what helps energize, magnetize the flow of blood, so that within the micro laboratories in the body, where we have connections of chakras with glands, that we can see the generation of hormones. Hormones that once they are all in harmony, they bring about the manifestation of superior abilities, faculties, and powers to the human being. It is important that we understand the importance of fire beyond the representation of this flaming thing that burns, into its superior aspect of what are our difficulties and tribulations. Because when we go through difficult circumstances, it is so easy for us to say, I had it. I am done with this. I just cannot deal with this anymore. It is very easy to say that. But we cannot forget the words of Apostle Peter. Because Peter, holder of the keys, he tells us, dear ones, do not marvel when you are examined by fire. Because it is through fire that we are tested. All of these difficult circumstances that we feel that they increase our internal pressure, that they make us uncomfortable. Well, these are difficult circumstances that are examining our ability to handle them. And when we demonstrate that we are capable of dealing with that, we certainly demonstrate some degree of mastery. If we keep running away, if we keep failing, well, the test will always keep coming back until we demonstrate by applying what we have learned. Specific to these difficulties and these tests of fire that we get, Samael tells us, practical life is precisely the psychological gymnasium through which we can discover our defects. Because when we see ourselves reacting, and we notice, we observe, how is it that we're thinking? How is it that we are expressing our sentiments? What is it that we're doing with our body? We start seeing from where these defects come from. Some defects project from the intellect. Others project from the emotional center. Others are instinctive in nature. Others are just habitual and they just take care of doing things with the body. Others are just strictly sexual. And when we have that level of understanding of our defects, it is with that comprehension that we can invoke of the fire of our Divine Mother and ask of her to extinguish these defects and reduce them to a cosmic dust. This image that we see here of a fire that destroys is titled anger. And this is an image from Peter Bruegel back from the 16th century. And it states at the very bottom, it says, anger inflames and veins in the face darken with blood. And here we see the many expressions and the many consequences of anger. So friends, the key to our liberation exists within the fire. Every alchemical text that we see, they always show us the element of fire, and they always show us a serpent that can redeem us. Here we see in this image an androgen. This is a perfect matrimony of two souls, one who loves most and another who loves better. And notice how they are carrying on one hand a serpent that redeems them. And notice that on the other hand, they are carrying a cup with the three principles of creation, the three gunas themselves. Notice how is it that they are standing backed by the lion of the law, and they are standing over that tempting serpent that brings about the different temptations, the tests that we must overcome in life. We have to start by restraining our impulses. Because when we restrain our impulse, we transmute our creative force into spiritual energy. If we go with our impulse and we scream and we insult and we slam doors, then our energy is going into the wrong places and it will generate sour consequences. But when we can restrain these impulses, we can transmute our creative force into spiritual energy. When that energy is available, it becomes easier for us to understand, to comprehend, to see and discover new aspects within us. And observation, comprehension, and elimination are the three main steps that lead us into liberation. So I would like to share with you a little practice that Samael does. Because to some degree, every one of us struggles with anger. And to combat anger, Samael says, inhale the vital air through your nose. And do this slowly, mentally counting to 6. Then he says, hold your breath by mentally counting to 6. And as you exhale, breathe out very slowly through your mouth, mentally counting to 6. It so happens that this breathing technique, there's a variation of it that is practiced by certain elite groups in the military as an exercise to center themselves before they walk into a very dangerous, high-stress situation. You see, they seek to calm themselves down before they go out and perform their missions. In our case, our mission as a spiritual warrior is that of combating the ego. And part of that restraining is this exercise. When we breathe, we help transmute of our creative energies. And as we hold and wait in our exercise, counting to 6, well, that helps calm down the physicality. It helps calm the emotion, and as a consequence, the mind also calms down. Friends, this is what we wanted to share with you today in terms of the elements of earth and fire. We sourced this material from the books titled The Mystery of the Golden Blossom, The Aztec Christic Magic, The Secret Doctrine of Anahuac, and some writings from the book of on the God of Water, Tlaloc. And we're also very grateful to all these sources of images because through them we were able to glue this presentation together and bring it today to you. So again, this has been The Gods of Fire and Earth, Koalikowi and Huehueteotl. Dear friends, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and may all beings be happy.